It started like any other midday lull. The clatter of keys in the background, the bitter scorch of oversteeped coffee, the predictable rhythm of an office I knew like muscle memory. I was polishing the final slide of my deck, enjoying that quiet, subtle satisfaction that comes from competence, from feeling like the ground beneath you is firm. That sensation lasted exactly 3 minutes. Rachel appeared beside me, her complexion gone strangely ash gray, her expression twisted in some private war. She leaned just barely forward and murmured, "Claire, could we talk somewhere alone?" My gut twisted. Rachel wasn't a whisperer. I gave her a small, reassuring smile anyway. "Sure. What's going on?" We walked to the break room. My heels tapping against the tiles suddenly sounded like gunshots, sharp, final. She didn't meet my eyes. She looked past me, like she was delivering a message she wished she could burn. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I hate being the one to say this, but everyone knows, Claire. Everyone except you." My heart slammed against my ribs, slow, heavy, off-tempo. "Knows what?" I said, releasing a laugh that didn't belong to me. She hesitated. Then, Mark, the affair. People have seen him after work with her. In that second, the entire room went vacuum silent. No office hum, no chatter, just the roar of my pulse, and a truth I didn't want to absorb. I blinked at her like she'd switched languages. Mark? Cheat. Impossible. He was steady, predictable, dependable, safe. "He's just been staying late because of the merger," I said, words mechanical. Rachel only shook her head. "That's what he tells you. But he's been meeting the HR girl, Elise. We've seen her waiting for him downstairs." Each word hit like a stone dropped into water, spreading outward until they reached every corner of me. I wanted to protect him, defend the narrative of our marriage, but the silence between us told the truth before I could. I forced a polite whisper. "Thank you for letting me know." My voice wasn't my voice. My hands would not stop trembling. When I walked out of that break room, the air suddenly felt weighted, like gravity had doubled. People glanced at me too fast. Guilt and pity have their own smell, sour and subtle. I returned smiles. Familiar faces suddenly felt strange. Every quiet conversation near me now sounded like her name. Inside, something fractured, quietly, like glass held under slow pressure. The rest of the afternoon was static. Emails, metrics, meetings, all noise without meaning. I kept typing, going through the motions, while Rachel's words replayed like a broken loop. "Everyone knows, Claire. Everyone but you." I looked down at my wedding ring, the simple circle of gold that once meant safety. Now it looked like a prop, a piece of evidence. All those nights he'd sworn he was swamped. All the times I'd chosen belief over suspicion. They lined up in my mind like puzzle pieces I had refused to assemble. I smiled as people walked by. Precision practiced. Polite. The art form of falling apart, invisibly. At 5 o'clock, I packed up and slipped out without a word. Outside, the air was thick, humid, a weight on my chest. I drove home in silence, city lights streaking across the windshield like warnings I ignored. I realized something strange. I wasn't crying. Not yet. I was calculating. When I walked through the front door, nothing looked different. His cologne lingered faintly. The dishwasher hummed. The hallway floor creaked like always. He glanced up from his laptop and smiled like a man with nothing to hide. "Long day. You seem drained." I wanted to tear the room apart. Instead, I smiled. It was educational. He chuckled, oblivious. "You say the oddest things when you're stressed." I studied him, the casual loosen of his tie, the way his phone never left his hand, how his attention never fully landed on me anymore. How had I missed it? We ate dinner in that fake hush people call peace. He talked about spreadsheets and office politics and weekend plans. I nodded in all the right places. Inside, I was cataloging his tells. Every look, every pause, every flimsy lie disguised as routine. He still believed he lived with the version of me who trusted him blindly. He didn't know she had been replaced at 2:37 p.m. in the break room. Later that night, when the shower switched on, I sat at the edge of the bed listening to the water hammer the tile. like a countdown ticking toward detonation. I picked up his phone, the device he guarded like contraband, and pressed my thumb on the scanner. He had added my print months ago, back when trust still meant something. The screen opened instantly, and there, glowing, was her name, Elise HR, like a bruise you can't look away from. I opened the threads, terms of endearment, emojis, jokes about me, plans after work, photographs, the type of language he used to reserve for me, now repurposed for someone who earned none of it. My lungs stalled between disbelief and fury. I wanted to hurl the phone across the room, but instead I moved like a surgeon. Screenshots, forwarded to my email, deleted traces, phone placed back exactly. The water shut off. I slid beneath the covers and looked at the ceiling. He joined me, smelling of soap and betrayal, and I lay there, calm, aware, knowing everything had changed. He whispered good night, like nothing in the world was fractured. I whispered it back, but in my head I was already constructing something sharp, exact, patient. I didn't sleep. I laid awake listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing and wondering how a man can rest so comfortably beside the person he's actively lying to. My mind reran every excuse, every canceled dinner, every mysterious late meeting, every don't wait up. And instead of collapsing into tears, something new surfaced. A cold, terrifying calm. The kind that arrives when the heart no longer begs for reasons, it starts thinking in steps. I saw every year I spent defending him. Every time I believed that being loyal meant closing my eyes, that peace meant being quiet. No, betrayal doesn't begin with the act. It begins with the confidence that you won't be found out. The streetlight threw a pale stripe of gold across our ceiling, and for the first time in a long time, I felt powerful, focused. By dawn, my plan had bones. Not revenge, not yet, but something cleaner. I would match his patience with precision, his deception with strategy. Let him think I was still the same woman who waited up, who trusted without question. Because truth hits hardest when it arrives without warning. The next morning at the office, I walked in exactly the same. Same heels, same smile, same coffee. If anyone sensed a shift, they probably thought I was just tired. I glanced at Rachel. A quiet nod. She clearly had something she wanted to say, but I wasn't ready yet. All day, between emails and meetings, I laid down my blueprint. Every keystroke was a move. I examined dates, reread messages, replayed conversations. The anger was still there, but it had discipline now. I was no longer the woman who got blindsided in the break room. I was the woman they never spot until too late. That realization tasted like control. By the time I got home, the decision was finished. No screaming, no dramatic confrontation. Chaos was his language, not mine. He thrived on control, so I would take it quietly. That night I lit candles, played music low, and cooked the meal he loved most. I put on the perfume he used to worship when we first dated. He walked in smiling, completely unaware that the woman handing him wine was not forgiving him. She was concluding her investigation. He looked around the table, surprised. Wow, he breathed soft. This is beautiful. What's the occasion? I smiled slow. To celebrating how loyal you've been lately. He laughed, a strange, brittle sound. Loyal? That's very specific, he said. I tilted my head. You have no idea. Dinner was a theater performance. Every gesture rehearsed. Every word measured. He took my hand, the same hand that had scrolled through his messages hours before. He told me about work, the merger, the stress, all while staring directly into my eyes. I nodded sweetly, tasting every lie like venom dressed in silk. He was proud of his performance. It almost entertained me how convinced he was that I still believed him. When dessert arrived, I looked at him and said softly, "We should go away this weekend. Just us. Reset." He lit up instantly, relief washing across his face. "Really? You mean that?" I leaned closer. "Of course. We deserve a change of scenery." He had no idea what scenery I was preparing, one where truth would stand in daylight and his flawless narrative would finally ignite. When he went to sleep later, smiling like a man absolved, I stayed awake with my laptop open and a glass of wine untouched. His phone had already surrendered everything. Names, dates, proof. I wrote one short, polite email the kind corporate HR departments do not handle well, attached the evidence he thought he buried, and scheduled it for Monday morning at peak office activity. Then I closed my laptop and stared out the window. The city looked sharper, like it was in on the perfectly timed aftermath. I felt no guilt. Why would I? I wasn't the liar. I was simply giving the truth a stage. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it smiles, pours wine, and waits. When I finally got into bed beside him, he reached for me in his sleep. Instinct, not love. His hand brushed my arm, and for a brief second, I remembered what love felt like before it soured. But empathy has an expiry date. Mine had already passed. I shut my eyes and sat there, still as stone, already ticking off hours until the weekend arrived. And when it finally did, it was almost laughably normal. Clear skies, a stuffed duffel bag, his casual, boyish grin while tossing luggage into the trunk. He believed this trip was a peace offering, a reset button. He had no idea I'd already left that fantasy behind. Music drifted through the car, his fingertips brushing mine now and then like muscle memory, like touch could rewrite betrayal. I smiled, played along. It's surprisingly easy to act when your heart isn't involved anymore. The view at breakfast could have been on a postcard, the lake rippling under soft morning sun, breeze lifting the curtains just enough to make everything look poetic. He looked calm, almost smug, sipping coffee like a man who assumed he'd successfully covered his tracks. My phone vibrated once. The message I'd been waiting for. The evidence had been sent, delivered. Perfect timing. I stirred my coffee lazily, watching the surface wobble like a mirror cracking. Then his phone started buzzing. First once, then again, then again. I watched him go rigid. He scraped his chair back from the table. "Hold on," he muttered, already half standing, already sweating. He stepped outside. I remained where I was, composed, unhurried, counting out the rhythm between realization and dread. It was fast. Through the window, I saw him pacing like a man possessed, phone clamped to his ear, one hand clutching his hair like he might rip it out. That was when the smallest smile found me, quiet, private, razor thin. His voice carried through the glass before he did, raised, frantic, choking on denial. "This is insane. It's not what it looks like. It's just a misunderstanding." He barreled back inside, face chalk white. "Somebody sent HR my messages," he blurted. "Those were private. I could lose my job." I lifted my gaze from the coffee as if thinking it over. "Private? You mean the ones you sent to Elise?" I blinked slowly. "I'm sure they'll see it as purely professional. Isn't that what you kept insisting?" He froze, mouth open, nothing coming out. The silence between us felt brittle, like glass about to fracture. "You did this," he finally whispered. I tilted my head, watching the man who used to control every narrative, now choking on his own. "You humiliated me for months," I said softly. "I didn't humiliate you. I simply told the truth." The words landed like judgment. Something in him caved. He looked smaller, diminished, like someone had punctured his lungs and let all the air leak out. He tried again to speak, but the excuses were gone. His little kingdom of lies had collapsed, and he finally had to sit in the wreckage. I stood up, folded my napkin smoothly, and looked at him one last time. Not with revenge in my eyes, but serenity. There was no triumphant smirk. Just relief. Freedom is a quiet thing, not loud, not vengeful, just clean. He muttered something about forgiveness, about moving forward. I didn't respond. Forgiveness belongs to people who are genuinely sorry. He wasn't sorry, he was just exposed. As I stepped outside, sunlight hit my face like a blessing. The lake shone, bright, sharp, promising. The air tasted new. Behind me his voice faded under clinking dishes and distant chatter. Ahead, stillness. And in that stillness, I felt something like rebirth. A week later, the entire landscape had changed. Not explosively, but definitively. The same office hallways that once echoed with whispers about me now whispered about him. Mark was suspended while HR dug deeper. Elise resigned overnight. Rumors raced through the building like fire, but I said nothing. Silence finally served me. People looked at me differently now, not with pity, but with a quiet respect they should have had all along. Rachel caught me near the elevator, her voice low, almost reverent. You really showed him. I smiled and shifted the folders in my arms. No, I said. I showed them I wasn't naive. It wasn't fury anymore. It was clarity. Plain, stripped down truth. I had lived under his shadow for years, and stepping out of it felt like filling my lungs for the first time. When I got home that evening, the house was unrecognizably peaceful. No shoes by the door. No coat on the banister. Silence, real silence, the kind that didn't sting anymore. It felt earned, and for the first time in years, the quiet wasn't punishment. It was mine. I poured a glass of wine and settled into the armchair by the window, watching daylight melt into dusk. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for footsteps, keys, or anyone's arrival. I was already whole, already home. He showed up 2 days later. Same knock, same shape of a silhouette, but everything that once made him larger than life was gone. His shoulders were soft, lowered. His voice was thin. Claire, please, he said, standing in the doorway with that awful mix of shame and entitlement. You can't just throw us away. I looked down at the box near my feet, his cufflinks, his watch, the polished little props he used to disguise deception. You did that, I replied, calm and steady. The moment you believed you could lie and I'd never see the truth. He stepped closer, eyes glassy, voice cracking. It was a mistake, he snapped, as if anger could revise history. I nearly laughed, not to mock him, but because of the absurdity. No, Mark. A mistake is a rare accident. You created a habit. My voice didn't shake. Silence had trained me to hold my tone like a blade. He reached for my arm out of old muscle memory. The reflex of a man accustomed to being forgiven, but I pulled away. His touch, once so familiar, now repulsed. He tried again, the apology, the pleading lines he'd rehearsed, the same script I once surrendered to, but I didn't speak that language anymore. I lifted the box, passed it to him, then opened the door. Goodbye, Mark. He hesitated, searching for the version of me he could manipulate. That version no longer existed. Then he walked away, and with every step he took from the threshold, the air inside my house felt lighter. When I closed the door, it wasn't out of punishment or rage. It was closure. The silence afterward stayed, but it wasn't hollow. It was sacred. I walked from room to room, touching what belonged to me, seeing it all clearly. The framed photos, the books, the chair by the window. Everything breathed easier. The house itself exhaled. I used to think keeping him was keeping peace. Peace, I learned, isn't the absence of argument, it's the absence of fear. The next morning, sunlight stretched across the sheets. No alarms, no performance, no pretending. I made coffee and stood by the window, letting the world move on without urgency. My reflection looked changed, older maybe, but not weakened. Softer at the edges, sharper at the core. I didn't see a betrayed woman. I saw a woman who turned betrayal into power. Later, I locked the door behind me when I left for work, and there was a small thrill in that, a clean chapter. No dramatic speech, just certainty. The pain had already done its job, and I was done with it. Months passed. Life feels both new and deeply familiar, like I've finally stepped into the version of my life that had been waiting for me quietly. At the office, everything is different. Mark's name is gone from the email chains. Mine appears on the door instead. They called it a promotion. I called it correction. No gloating necessary. Success speaks loudest when it walks in quietly. People are careful around me now, respectful, a little nervous. And yes, I admit, a part of me takes a silent pleasure in that shift. Rachel and I share coffee every Friday now, our own ritual. Two women who've seen too much, sitting like it's just an ordinary morning. One Friday, she leans in and says, "You really turned everything around." I smile, stir my coffee, watch the steam curl up. Sometimes, letting people underestimate you is its own strategy. It makes the ending far more satisfying. She laughs, not loudly, but I see pride in her eyes. The kind only women who live through fire understand. After she leaves, I sit near the window again, seeing myself reflected in the glass. Not the woman whispered about, not the woman humiliated, not the woman deceived. I see clarity, peace, a woman who realized that truth isn't punishment, it's liberation. And once you see through illusion, truly see it, you can never, ever go back to living inside it.